You gotta pay half a year's rent, the same boring wallpapers on the walls. Oof, dirty. Don't do this. What are you doing? No way this can look nice. Give up and then just go back to your own country again. The safety, the cleanliness, the easiness, the amazing food. You get treated as a child, and I just felt the potential of this place. The whole story is in my book as well.
Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Tobi, and today we welcome Anton.
Thank you. Konnichiwa. Dankeschön. Thank you for having me, Tobi.
Thank you, Anton, for coming today. A lot of people know you maybe from your YouTube channel, Anton in Japan. Some people know you from your book that we have here, Free Houses in Japan.
Free Houses in Japan. The true story of how I make money DIY renovating abandoned homes.
And that's a lot of what we are going to talk about today, renovating abandoned homes, akiya. But before that, maybe can you tell us what brought you to Japan in the first place?
So I came to Japan for the first time in 2015. I've been doing fashion modeling in Europe and the US since 2011 when I graduated high school. I've spent a lot of time in Germany, Berlin, Hamburg, New York, Paris, London, and in Stockholm in a small hotel. My agency sent me to a small casting. And my Japanese manager came there and he casted me and asked me to come to Japan for 2 months. And I did late 2015 and I fell in love with the country. I was back for 2 months, 1 year later, 2 months, 1 year later again. And every time I was about to leave, I just wanted to stay. And 3 years after I came here for the first time, I made the move. So I moved here in the end of 2018.
Also, same as me.
Oh, really?
We arrived at around the same time then in Japan.
Yeah.
What was the thing that made you want to stay every time?
I think it was the safety, the cleanliness, the easiness, the amazing food, how nice people were, how you could count on things around you. The train was departing at 12:39 and it departed at 12:39 exactly. It's like German efficiency, but even better, sorry to say.
I would say that the German efficiency does not apply that much to the Deutsche Bahn, the train systems in Germany, unfortunately. But
you get what I mean.
You can make plans and you can follow your plans here when you're traveling. Well, you came initially as a model and working here. Did you notice any first differences when working as a model here in Japan as opposed to the modeling jobs you were doing in Germany, Europe, and the US?
A lot. It's a completely different job. First of all, I think if you come here as a model, you get treated as a child. The managers, they put you in a model apartment. They give you a weekly allowance. They pick you up in front of your house. They drive you to castings. They treat you as a 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old child. You don't have to think about anything really. You just decide on where you go partying or what you're going to do for the weekend if you have free time.
So back in Europe, it would be more like, okay, be at this time, this place for the shoot and bring whatever you need. And
you show up to the agency tell you, you got to be at this address at 4 o'clock, bring black pants. Or you got to be at this place that's 2 hours outside of the city, be clean shaven and wear something nice. And then it's all up to you to just show up. And Japan was just, they really monitored you and took care of you in a completely different manner and in a completely different way.
So 2018, you decide to make the move and come permanently?
Yes.
Or at least for the long term. Was this also to come to do and work as a model?
Initially, yes. I came here, but the difference that time was that I moved into not a model apartment, but I moved into a share house. Close to Sendagai. I used to live in Roppongi, right in the party crossing. That was where my agency have all their model apartments. But I moved into a share house. So I shared a house. I had my separate room. It was a really nice house. 6 different rooms. The owner of the share house is a Japanese man working for a bank called Shingo. He's been helping me a lot in the house buying endeavors and the house buying and renovating journey that I've started later on. But I moved into a share house. It was pretty hard to find. I found it on Craigslist.
Of all places.
Of all places. I started learning how to use Craigslist when I lived in New York, and I just tried Japan and it worked somehow. So I moved into the share house in Sendagaya, not too far away, and I was always biking everywhere, wherever I went. And when I was a little bit tired of that, after living in the share house for 6 months, doing modeling, also learning Japanese through acting school, I was a little bit tired of living in that share house. So I started looking for apartments, and I was baffled over how crazy expensive and crazy hard it is to find a nice place to live in Tokyo as a foreigner. You got to pay 2 months of gift money to the landlord, deposits, you got to pay key money, that just adds up.
It adds up a lot. You can end up paying like what, 1 million yen just upfront?
Just to move to an apartment that's, I don't know, 150,000 yen in rent, but upfront you got to pay half a year's rent in advance. Money you won't get back. And that was crazy to me. I lived in many different places and this has never occurred to me. Why would you pay that? So I started looking into other options, and then I met this crazy Canadian friend of mine who's been living here since the 90s, and he advised me, why don't you just buy a place? And I started looking into buying options, and I went to about 10 different showings. My Japanese was terrible at this time, so I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I wanted to live in Japan, spend a lot of time here, and I've been moving around a lot. And I think to get grounded, if you don't have a nice place to stay, or if you don't have a home, I think it's easy to just give up and then just go back to your own country again, right?
It always feels very temporary. If you stay in a share house, you never know, should I buy this piece of furniture? I might move in 6 months or not. And then you never end up creating the space of your own that you want. And it always feels like temporary.
Exactly. Especially if you live in a model apartment. You can leave tomorrow and the agency will take care of the moving. Share house is a little bit different because I had my own contract here. But buying an apartment, you can't just leave. And I knew I wanted to be in Japan and spend a lot of time here.
So the interest in akiya started from the idea of, instead of renting something and spending so much money up front into moving into an apartment in Tokyo, why don't I look for buying something? But now you think of buying a place in Europe, that's going to cost you a few €100,000 or dollars if you're in the States, or krona in Sweden.
Kronor, yes.
So how do you buy something that's cheaper and more affordable than something to rent here in Japan?
So I didn't really know much about akiyas, but I knew about renovation and DIY. That's how I grew up in Sweden. My parents, they bought a 120-year-old house in the suburbs of Stockholm. It was completely run down. They took a loan from my grandma and they bought this house. And me and my younger sisters, we built 3 houses and small houses of leftover wood. And that was my childhood. That's kind of a Swedish way. If you don't have the money to hire carpenters, you do it yourself. Obviously, we don't have earthquakes. We don't have natural disasters in the same extent as Japan. But I work as a model. I work 2-3 days a week. I had the time. I knew I wanted to be in Japan. So I was looking for a place, not necessarily to flip or sell or rent out, but more of a place that I could craft my own space and make my own house. Because not only the initial fees for moving in Tokyo was so high, I just found the general apartments pretty boring. No sunlight. The same boring wallpapers on the walls. If you have money, you can probably find something really nice.
A lot of money.
If you have a lot of money.
We talked to Alex from Tokyo Portfolio a few weeks ago, and the amounts needed for spacious space. Well, what a way to phrase it. For spacious apartments with sunlight, with a view, is just incredible.
Yeah, so it costs a lot of money. In my case, I've saved up about $100,000, and after viewing maybe 10 different apartments in the Shibuya area, I found a place, and I knew the first moment I stepped inside this apartment that this can look incredibly nice.
So this was an akiya.
This was an apartment on the third and fourth floor. It's been featured in a lot of videos online, but not as. I'm renting it out now to a good friend and model friend of mine, Baya. She's also been featured in Caleb Simpson's "Hey, excuse me, how much do you pay for rent in Tokyo?" Mm-hmm. And she's showing him this beautiful house.
That's the first one you got?
That's the first one I got. And the whole story is in my book as well.
Okay.
But I found this place and I just felt the potential of this place. I brought my girlfriend in there and she was like, "Oof, dirty. Don't do this. What are you doing? No way this can look nice." But I bought it through the broker friend of this crazy Canadian friend of mine that told me to buy a place. And the fees for buying this place was about 500,000 yen.
About $4,000, 4,000 euros.
$3,500. Yeah. And if I would have rented the same place, the upfront costs would have been about twice as high because I went with a cheap broker of buying it. If I would have gone with a good broker, the fees would probably have been higher, but they probably would have bargained a little bit more in my favor. But I got about 2 million yen off on the price, and I could buy it for about $90,000 at the time, like really close to Shibuya in 2019. And then the renovation started, the fun thing. And I renovated it for about half a year, like piece by piece. I was living in my girlfriend's house because I spent all my money on buying this piece of shit. So I was living in her house for about half a year while doing modeling and then renovating on the side. Learning how to approach builders, learning what you're allowed to do. You can't do electricity, you can't do plumbing here. Learning where to buy wood. Like I only have friends in the fashion sector, in the fashion industry. So learning the trade and how that works in Japan was a cultural shock in many ways.
When you set out to renovate that first place of yours, you mentioned just a few minutes ago that you grew up building tree houses and that it was kind of part of your upbringing to renovate and to do DIY. But how much did you feel like looking at the space you could do yourself, and how much did you realize after, like, oh, actually I can't do all of this? Like, what kind of skill set did you go in with?
So more of like, I like open spaces. I like nature. I like sunlight. And you don't really need that much, really. Like, you need plumbing, you need electricity, you need maybe a bed. But there are some factors you can change in an apartment or a house, and there are some factors you cannot change. You can never change the location of a house. You can never change, or you can, but it's very hard. You can never change the location of the windows. So if you have good sunlight and the direction of the windows, there is endless of opportunities. To make the house bigger, it's gonna take a lot of manpower and a lot of money, and it's in most cases not possible. But if you have a space of this, in this case, we had about 39 square meters, 25 on the first floor, and then a little loft. And we built, me and my friends, we built a small staircase out of plywood. We just stripped everything out, and the kitchen was originally in the genkan right when you entered. We took away a wall and removed it, like moved it to another part of the 25 square meters on the first floor. So most of the work was actually just demolition and just making it into a really cool, like industrial looking with a lot of natural light and a lot of natural wood.
So open up the space and then redo the kind of walls and flooring just to make it look nice.
Yeah, but when you say redo, like I just put plywood on the walls and then maybe some paint. Like material itself is not really expensive. It's just the imagination and the time spent into doing this. And I'm very passionate about it too. I love creating things, spaces, videos, like being creative is something. If I didn't do that in my life, I don't think I would be happy.
How long did it take for this first project from the moment you bought the place and you started the renovation until you were able to move in there?
About 4 months. I think that was about 1 month too early because I think I had a small fight with my girlfriend and she was like, get out. And I had to kind of move in a little bit early. But then I had a bed. It was just details left. And if you do DIY, like you'll never be 100% finished. It will always be 90% finished. The last 10% is like impossible to finish. So it took about 4 months, and I would say the place was about 90% finished, maybe 6 months after I started the renovation. And then I moved in completely, moved all the things from my girlfriend's place and moved in there.
But that's only when things really got started.
That's
right?
exactly. Then I felt, okay, this is something I want to do again. Because when you're done, you have this 1 month or 2 month period of you're letting it sink in. What are you going to do now? And I knew I wanted to keep doing this. So I started looking for houses. That was right before COVID, and my dad came to visit, and he also loves DIY, he also loves renovating homes. And he asked me if we could watch and go and look at some old houses in Tokyo, because that's a great way to see how Japanese people live. So I reached out to the broker friend of mine, and he rode us around in a small little Toyota car. And we looked at 4 or 5 old houses. One of them was just a few minutes away from my apartment that I bought and that I lived in at the time. And I knew the moment I stepped in there, like, this could be a really cool house. And when COVID hit, I didn't have the funds. I didn't have nothing to, like, it was just to show my dad and kind of like do something fun while being there. And COVID hit, and the broker reached out to me again, called me up and said, the owner of this place, they really need to sell. I think they had some trouble with COVID, financially though. And the broker told me, okay, they really got to sell. You get 30% off. I'll give you a loan, 100% loan. Do you want the house? And I just said yes. I got the house a few weeks later, and during COVID, I basically became a carpenter because there were all these kinkyu jitaisengen, the
state of emergency.
State of emergency.
Shouldn't go or couldn't go to many places, yeah.
So I became a carpenter, and I learned how to go from the apartment to this house. And this house took about half a year because it was a full house, about 80 square meters, but I learned. Obviously, renovating a house versus renovating an apartment is completely different. I learned that houses are not insulated. There's single pane windows. Like, there's a lot of tilt to be done. It's a much bigger project taking on an akiya than actually doing an apartment. But with that said, there is also a lot more possibilities because you own all the land in most cases. So 6 months into renovating that one, then I moved in with my girlfriend, and there was this akiya on my street, another akiya, that I knew was abandoned as well. There are actually 2, but there's only one that I saw a lot of potential in this one. So I knocked the door to my neighbor and asked them if they knew the contact information to that person. And they did, and they asked, why do you want their contact information? And I said, yeah, well, I'm doing DIY. You saw I made the other house this nice. Maybe I can buy and renovate that one as well. And she said, okay, yeah, sure. And she gave me the contact information, and I reached out, and they came by 3-4 weeks later. They came by every second month just to air out the house. And we talked for about 13-14 months, and they showed me the house inside. It was filled with things everywhere. This is the house that went viral online. And out of respect, like, it was a full life in there. And they asked me, do you really want to buy this? Like, why would you want to buy this? Our things are everywhere. This is going to be so expensive for you. And I knew I could pull it off, but at the same time, you got to show respect to the seller as well. It was really like tripping on toes. I couldn't really check if there were water leaks. You couldn't really check if the pillars were solid. But we agreed on a price of about 10 million yen, which is incredibly cheap for an akiya, but it was also a lot of work. Also, the registry wasn't really what it said it was as well. It was built in 1936, so actually pre-war. And I spent about 1 year into renovating this house. At the same time, I was doing YouTube in Japanese as well. And the Japanese people thought I was crazy to like actually pulling something off. Because, as you know, Japanese culture, they tear old buildings down and then they build something brand new. But I was actually using the old material, using old pillars and just maintaining and renovating this house.
So that's a house that is visible in one of your latest YouTube videos where you show your latest Japanese renovation.
Yes.
So your first apartment that you bought and renovating that got you interested into renovating more. So you got a house and you renovated that, and then you saw another potential location. And this is how you really got into renovating akiya.
Yes,
now,
exactly.
For someone who's maybe not so familiar with why are there so many empty homes and what is an akiya, can you explain maybe what falls under that category, what it means and what it is?
So an akiya, it basically means empty house. There are akishitsu, and that's apartments as well. Actually, in the apartment that I just told you about, there are many akishitsu as well. And
in that building?
In that building. And that can also potentially be a huge problem because you pay management fees and other things, other streams of income for the building itself. You lose money. So it could potentially be a money pit and a money trap buying into these old condominiums in Japan and Tokyo in my case. And an akiya is an abandoned or an empty house. There's not really a good word for it. Abandoned, it sounds very dramatic, but it's great for views online. So an akiya, it's an abandoned empty home. Japan's population is declining drastically. Last year with over 800,000 people. Demographically, people are moving from the countryside into Tokyo. So in the countryside, some villages are like, they have about 50, 60, 70% akiya, some of them. In Tokyo, Setagaya, where some of my houses are, have about 52 or 53,000 empty homes. And
52 to 53,000 empty homes in that ward of Tokyo.
Yeah, which is like Brooklyn of Tokyo. It's unbelievable. It really is. And some of these ones, you know who the owner is. Some of these ones, you don't know who the owner is. Trash disposal in Tokyo is incredibly expensive. So some of these akiyas, they become gumiyashiki, which it basically becomes a trash house. So people just throw their old trash inside of these houses. And then when it becomes a societal problem and the neighbors complain, that's when the municipality actually do something about it. But most of these houses, they just sit there with the previous owner's stuff. Maybe the owner passed away. Maybe the children have inherited. There are several reasons why no one is doing anything about these akiyas. But I think demographically, tax reasons as well. A lot of these houses are unrebuildable. Renovation culture isn't really what it is in Europe and the US. I grew up in a 120-year-old house. The old town in Sweden is hundreds of years old, and Japan has a culture of tearing down, building new, tearing down, building new. And with that said, they also have a culture of old temples. Mottaina, you should take care of what you have. So there's a little gap there, I think.
And those akiya regularly make the headlines, right? You see them on news sites like BBC, CNN, and many more about 8 million empty homes in Japan. Grab yours for free. But
most of these people or most of these journalists writing these articles, they have no experience in this. No experience at all, and no one really wants to take responsibility for it. Even the brokers here, like, one of the big reasons is the broker industry in Japan as well, I think. And also the house makers. It's a stimulation of the economy. Tearing down and building brand new. If you're a broker, do you want to sell a house for $1,000 and then you make a commission of 3%? It's not worth your time. Or you want to sell a house for $2 million. You'll make a lot more money and it's more sustainable from a financial perspective, right? So I don't really know. It's a little bit infected there, I think.
But from those 8 million empty houses, a lot of them are in a place where you can't actually save them, right? They've been abandoned for so long, and Some of them have been used for trash disposal, as you mentioned. So when you look at them and you decide to buy one for renovation, how do you decide what makes a good akiya, an akiya worth investing in, where you actually would get something out of renovating the place?
If you want to spend time, so what I'm doing, I'm running Airbnbs, I'm running long-term rentals, and I also live in one. So it really depends on what you want to do with your akiya. Are you looking for a summer holiday home? Are you looking for an investment for long-term? Are you looking for an Airbnb unit? There are many factors that play in. If you want to buy an akiya, you got to do footwork on your own. If you go through a broker or a middleman, Japan is filled with middlemen, and people are going to eat all the money that you could potentially make as an investment unit. So if you would do some footwork on your own, maybe you hire a broker that's like normal. But most of these akiyas, they're not houses brokers want to deal with. So if you dig a little bit, the broker will just find out that they tried to sell a house maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, and it never sold. Mm-hmm. So it's hidden somewhere. There are other ways. I have some Japanese friends who does this for a living. They do akiya investments, and they go out in the countryside and they buy cheap houses for $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. And these are usually houses that no one really wants to deal with them. And there are brokers who just want to get rid of them. So if they would reach the normal market, maybe they would be 4, 5, 6 million yen. But if they sell 100 akiyas for 1 million yen, that's better. But you got to find these brokers specializing in these houses.
And there are also some initiatives, I think, from local governments and cities that set up these akiya banks. Right?
These akiya banks.
Websites that list.
Once they reach the akiya bank, I think it's already too late. I think if you ask the pros, this is not how they find them. If you ask the Japanese akiya investors, this is not how they usually find. There are good cases with people finding good, and I think the initiative is great. I don't think in reality it really works, because that's for akiya banks. It's not really a bank. It's just the municipality who's utilizing a platform where they sell the akiyas instead of going through sometimes it's run by brokerages or the municipalities, but they're not really run by banks. Mm-hmm. If you can find a way to buy akiyas without an akiya bank, I think you'll find better properties, and you'll find cheaper properties, and you'll find properties with even more potential.
When you step into one of those places, especially because they are old, what do you look out for? Because I imagine there can be a lot of water damage, there can be termites, there can be, and you mentioned earlier as well in one of your videos that I've seen, a lot of these houses are tilted. Yeah. They're not straight, or some floors are not straight. So what are the key things to look out for that if you notice them, you're maybe not this one?
So I always look at the area. Number one, area is a factor you can change. Area, and then land. Inside the house, I always look for water leaks, and then foundation as well. So roof and foundation, those two are the most important things, I think. Everything else, you can change most of it.
You can find a way around it.
Yeah, but if it's been leaking water for 10 years, in most cases, the wood is gonna rot, and it's not gonna be easy to save it. It's going to be very expensive. Mm. Water leaks, foundation, termites. If you buy an old house, there will be termites, but to what extent? Will you have termites crawling in the ceiling or in the roof everywhere? You might as well buy a new house, just tear it down and buy something new.
Is there a way to find out if there are termites to a point where it might be dangerous? No. So it's a gamble.
It's a gamble. And the way you buy a cheap akiya is to make it easy for the seller. So within the framework of what you know, try to do as much research as possible. Be true to yourself and what you need, and make yourself an easy buyer. Make it easy for the seller to sell to you. So do your research, but don't overdo it, and don't ask too many questions. if it's a good akiya, it will sell anyway. And you got to trust your gut feeling in a way. I have some experience with this now, but if you don't have experience, maybe you got to hire a pro to come and assess the building, or like an inspector or something, but that costs money as well. And if you buy a house for $5,000, is it worth paying an inspector $5,000 as well? And then you got to pay the real estate fee on top of that. I think the most important thing is, so what you say, 8.5 million abandoned homes. I think even more. I think those numbers are from 2018. In 2022, there will be 22. In 2033, there will be almost 22 million abandoned homes in Japan. And that's only 9 years from now. So while the population is declining, the amount of these abandoned homes are just growing rapidly. And it's a blue ocean. Like, what is Japan going to do with all these houses?
It's untapped potential in a way.
It is. And it's a completely new market. The immigration is growing. The renovation and the DIY culture is also growing, which I find fascinating, which I find really fun. And I see opportunities in that as well. But if you are thinking about buying an akiya, I think it's not about the akiya, it's about the community you buy into, really. If you buy into a community and you contribute to that community, other akiyas will show up. People will support you. You will support them. So if you buy into a community where you're not appreciated, like, you might as well give up. And then you sit there with an old house that maybe you don't like being in and around, and you have no support. But if you buy into a community, like, so many opportunities will arise.
So it's better to buy a place, in your opinion, that is a place you've been to before, a place that you know, and not necessarily, oh, I like this beautiful house in this area, I'm going to renovate this, without knowing where you're going to move into.
If I would to buy a new akiya in the countryside, I would go to the area. I would feel the area. If it's a really beautiful house, you fell in love with the house, it's close to the ocean, you see potential there, I would go around, I would talk to the neighbors, I would say hi, I would feel the local izakaya, I would just eat the local sashimi, I would just feel it and trust your gut, really. And I don't really see and understand why people would want to buy akiyas from abroad, especially if they haven't been to Japan. With my social media, I get like a lot of requests from people. Yeah, I want to buy a house in Japan. But they've never been to Japan. Why would they want to do that? If they're only going to spend 2-3 weeks a year here, like, they might as well live in a hotel, right?
Or rent an Airbnb. Renovated by you.
Or yeah, they could. They should maybe.
Once you find a place that you like and you decide, okay, I'm getting this.
Yeah.
Some of those places can go for very cheap, and some people may be able to just pay cash for it, and it's end of story. But you also mentioned you've acquired a property that was 10 million yen. 10 million yen might need some financing.
Yeah.
How does financing work for those akiya? Is it possible to get a loan from a bank for a place that is kind of old and maybe abandoned?
Both yes and no. If you're not a resident of Japan, in general, it would be very hard to get a loan. If you are a resident, there are some banks that will give you a loan, but there are some criteria as well. And Japan is all about middlemen. If you know people, usually brokers can like put up the loan in front of you, because they have people inside who can kind of help out. So coming as a resident with no connections, with it really depends on the purchase amount as well, I think. If it's a really cheap house, you can sometimes get probably an investment loan to maybe 3, 4, 5% interest, and maybe that's worth it as well. But you can usually get a loan for the land if it's a nice piece of land.
In Setagaya.
In Setagaya. So if there's a bank that's in Setagaya, they might give you a loan for an akiya in Setagaya. If it's a land in Chiba, you probably need to go through a Chiba bank as well.
So you find a place, you figure out your financing, now you have to renovate.
Yes.
Can you walk us through your renovation process? Where do you even start when you step into a house that still has all the belongings from the previous owner?
I just walk around, feel, touch, smell. I think the more time you spend in an akiya, the more your ideas will change over time. Like if you, the first thought you have with whatever you do, the more time you spend in that space, your ideas and your vision and your dreams will change over time. So the first thing you have to do is to just get rid of all the previous owner's belongings. So that's not easy, that's not cheap. It will require a lot of work. Just getting rid of the previous owner's belongings in this particular house was about $2,000. And that was before renovation started in the first place. I think I spent about $5,000 or $6,000 on trash removal alone. And then I did most of the job.
That's quite a lot.
It's so much money. It was like, 25% of my initial budget just to get rid of the trash. And then you gotta pay for materials and putting in a concrete slab and everything else that you gotta do. So I would just get rid of that, and then you have a clean slate. You see the walls. What walls do you want to keep? What windows do you want to keep? Where is the sunlight coming in from? Getting rid of everything you don't want to get rid of. Then you kind of decide what you want to do. And the more time you spend there, your ideas and your vision and your dreams will change over time.
How do you source all the material to rebuild the staircase, to redo the walls, to remake the flooring, to set in the new kitchen?
So kitchen, I'm working with a Swedish interior company. You probably know which one. My local lumber is helping me tremendously with everything. And I'm not really picky with, I'm picky with design choices. And obviously, like if you're gonna change a pillar and stuff, I'm working with local carpenters. But I like to mix old with new. And if the lumber has old wood that has been sitting there for 5-10 years, they usually give it to me for free or very cheap, and I can usually utilize it somehow. They also think I'm a little crazy because of that, but I just enjoy showing them that it's actually possible, because Japanese renovation has one way of doing it, and I'm doing it like a mix, Swedish, Japanese, and I think they find it very fascinating, and I enjoy doing it as well.
So you managed to find a local community of sort of people that supply you with material that are getting interested in what you do in your free time, so to say, to rebuild those places in a different way.
Exactly. So the local community, they like local tatami guys, local electricians, local carpenters. If you're passionate and if you have a dream, like people will just follow along and enjoy helping out. And that's where I tapped into. The local lumber has helped me so much. I bike there. I'm telling them what I need, what I want. And then they just put my bicycle on the back of the truck with all the wood that I just ordered. And then we drive home, and then I just start building again.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And they're coming by for dinners, and because they've seen the entire process, you know. And I just started a new renovation project about 1.5 months ago. And I ordered about $2,000 of wood last week, and they came over and like, ha, you started again.
So this is your 4th project?
This is my 4th project. I have a 5th vacation house in Chiba as well, but I haven't really started on it because I've been just too busy with a lot of things. But this is my 4th project, yes.
Throughout all those renovations that you've done so far, have there been any really unexpected findings during the renovation process where you plan to do something and suddenly you discover, oh my God, I can't do this? And how do you adapt to those situations?
The plan changes almost all the time, I think. You're thinking about, okay, on the wall over there, I would like to have a pine wall. But then you have a pine wall to the left, and maybe you want to switch it up a little bit. So materials are changing all the time. In my new house, I wanted to lower the floor about 25 centimeters, but I had like huge chunks of concrete in the foundation. And I didn't want to spend a week to cut concrete in the new house. So in the end, I couldn't lower the floor. There are like unexpected things happening all the time. Found termites in the new house just 2 days ago as well. There are unexpected things happening all the time. And if you're thinking about buying or renovating an akiya, like just get rid of as much things as you can in the beginning.
So remove to the core and
Yeah.
then rebuild most of it.
Yeah. So remove everything you don't need, everything you don't want, and then you start from a clean slate, and everything will get so much easier.
On the legal side of things, are there any restrictions as to what you're allowed to do with a house that you own? To mind come, for example, in certain neighborhoods in the West, you can only have your house walls painted in a certain color. You're not allowed to suddenly paint it in bright pink. You're not allowed to build closer to a certain distance from the neighboring house and such. What kind of legal framework do you have to operate within?
In Sweden, we have, if you're going to build your house 2 meters, within 2 meters away from your neighboring house's land, like you have to have a permit, or you have to have a,
Same
you
in
have to have a
France.
permit. In Japan, you would think that Japanese building rules are super strict, which they are in some cases. But in some cases, it's not strict at all. For example, this Sangenjaya house, the one I renovated, when I bought it, it was a two-story house on 80 square meters. But on paper, it was a one-story house, 36 square meters, which means that the previous owner, 50, 60 years ago, they just decided, nope, now we want a second floor. We want a second-story house. So they just built a second floor.
Which is not recorded anywhere on official
documents. It's not recorded anywhere, nowhere. So it's gray in a way. You will need permits. You will need kenchiku kakunin, kenchiku kyoka in many cases, especially if the renovation costs more than 5 million yen. You cannot do electricity on your own. There's some plumbing you can't do on your own. You cannot touch any gas. I would not touch any structural integrity of the house without consulting with a pro. And when the renovation is done, you usually have someone from the municipality coming and checking everything out. With that said, there's also a lot of gray things going on, because if you have an akiya in your neighborhood, would you rather have someone taking care of that akiya and being like maintaining it and actually taking care of it with love, or would you want an empty house that is, it could be a fire hazard, like what if the earthquake happens, what if there are animals living in there? I have an akiya investor friend of mine. She bought an akiya 4 months ago in Chiba, and she renovated it. It was done about 3-4 weeks ago, and there was an akiya neighboring hers, and it caught fire just last week. And her newly renovated akiya just
completely gone
as well. So that's another big, like, fire hazards are a huge thing as well. It's historically in Japan as well. So people are afraid of fires, and akiyas is
prone to that.
Yes.
If they're not well maintained. Your akiya that you renovated, they seem to be from the 20th century, so 1930s and beyond, like Showa period.
Yes.
Have you ever taken a look at these older properties, like the kominka?
I love them. They're so beautiful. I'm a big fan of the miyadaiku, like the joinery, Japanese joinery. And it's really cool to work together with Japanese carpenters, where they're actually utilizing these old techniques. They could build old, like, Japanese temples without using a single screw. Isn't that fantastic? It's so cool. Just maintaining these old houses is it's a big pain. You know, it costs a lot of money to build them,
but also to maintain.
them.
On your journey of renovation, when came the idea to start filming it and recording it and publishing online?
So I've done this for about 5 years now in Japan. 3 years ago, I started a Japanese YouTube channel, mostly to learn Japanese better. And it was more of a DIY channel. This is kind of DIY, I thought. And it is, in a way, renovation DIY. And that was how I learned content creation and how to make movies and videos. And I think a Japanese viewer and a foreign viewer wants to see different things on YouTube. An inbound audience wants to see, this is how Japan works. A Japanese audience wants to see, this is how a foreign country works. So this is how a foreign culture, this is how it works in Sweden, this is how it works in the US. So I made a lot of cultural videos about Swedes. We're not using umbrellas. In Swedish houses, we have insulation. in Sweden we don't have abandoned houses. And it grew pretty quickly. I have about 120,000 subs on that YouTube channel, even though I haven't really posted anything in about a year. When the second house was done, I felt a little bit empty. Like, okay, now I've been working for about a year, so hard, modeling, renovating. Finally, it's done. What should I do now? And I made 2 videos in English. Created new channels on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram.
Anton in Japan.
Anton in Japan. I remember sitting on a Mercedes-Benz showroom in Roppongi, close to where I lived for the first time when I came to Japan. And I called my friend like, hey, I'm starting an English channel. What's a good name? It's my friend Martin. He's also Swedish. He was like, yeah, I'll do like all the other YouTubers are doing, something in Japan, Anton in Japan. And I started new accounts, made 2 videos, posted them, and they went viral, both of them. One of them had like 40 million views, like the first video I made. And in 2 weeks, I had more subscribers on the English channel than I had on the Japanese channel.
Wow.
And I just thought, people seem to enjoy this. So I just kept on going and kind of abandoned the Japanese channel.
So you started documenting a little bit the renovation process, making a lot of short form content, still to compare, to show what it's like in Japan,
Exactly.
Talking about akiya, and maybe some longer videos as well to go more in depth into the renovation process. And kind of.
Yeah, but so all the content I filmed earlier was in Japanese. So it was very hard to kind of remake them into English. With my new house now, like I'm doing it the right way, and I'm really excited to actually, because I haven't really been doing any DIY for the past 9-10 months. It's more like repurposing the old videos. So now we're starting again, and I'm super excited about it.
Finally being able to show the process from start to finish.
To show the process from start to finish with a higher quality of videos, and also like working with my own hands. Because now I've been looking at hundreds of akiyas, like which is the best one, which is a great one. And also like just woodwork, I just generally love it.
It seems like from all the DIY, you always get back to the wood, right?
Yeah.
The thing you grew up with,
Exactly.
building the tree houses. And in your videos, I noticed you talk a lot of, this oak wood or this wood or this wood. And,
Yeah. It's Japan is using a lot of hinoki and sugi. Hinoki is great. It smells all of these
cedar
woods.
tree, right?
Cedar, yeah. Hinoki is cypress.
Oh, cypress.
Sugi is cedar. Another favorite of mine is oak as well. And then they have beimatsu, which is a kind of pine as well. And I use a lot of pine for my walls. But these are all nerd terminology. So for someone who's just getting started, I think it will take some time to learn what wood is good for what purpose, really.
How did it change a little bit your day-to-day to go from you doing your modeling, doing your renovations, to having 2 videos go to over 40 million views and suddenly having hundreds of thousands of subscribers asking you questions, wanting to interact with you, wanting to see more of your content and your life?
It was overwhelming and fun, but also kind of draining in a way. Like I didn't at the time, I didn't have any social media manager or anyone like I could work with. It was just me. I just finished my house and I started putting up videos, and then suddenly you receive thousands of comments, sometimes a week, you know. I enjoy it now, but sometimes it's really overwhelming. I'm just one person, and I didn't feel that I was enough. I have to answer everything, and if you gotta answer everything,
you spend your day just answering questions,
exactly.
and you don't actually do the DIY and the recording.
And for what, really? Like, you never know who's on the other side of the screen and stuff. And also hate online as well. I've never met one single person being mean in real life, but online it's like if I have a bad day, you can feel it sometimes, but I think everybody does that.
It can be daunting, right?
It can be.
And
But most people, I would say 99% of fans and people reaching out are nice. Maybe even more, you know.
you mentioned earlier you get some questions about, I want to buy an akiya.
Yeah.
Do you also get people very interested into the actual process? And
A lot of people. I've been doing a lot of seminars lately with IKEA, Volvo, and real estate related stuff.
Swedish companies.
Swedish companies, also some American and some Japanese, but it's fun to work with your motherland sometimes. Yes, I get a lot of people very interested in the process, and also a lot of Japanese people interested in what should I do with my akiya? Can you renovate my akiya? Can you do something about my abandoned house I have? And during these 5 years, I've had 3 or 4 Japanese friends buying akiyas and renovating them and having them as vacation homes, and that's really fun to see. And now people are interested mostly there's a lot of foreigners who has no connection with Japan reaching out, and I find it fun in some way, but also I think maybe I'm not the first person they should reach out to. I think maybe they should be here and do their own research first, or maybe read my book and actually like do their own research before just trying to buy something here.
So what is it that you'd like to share when you're creating your next project? Of course, you want to showcase the renovation process of your upcoming house and the ones after that. But is there something in particular that you want to build in terms of educational content, maybe teaching DIY renovation?
That's probably the next step. Now I'm doing one house fully for content. We'll create a beautiful Japanese Scandinavian house, and hopefully I can be to help some people. Educational content is probably coming next. I like design. Who doesn't like beautiful things? So for me, obviously this will hopefully this will generate money as well, like the house itself. But my main goal is to create like beautiful things that make sense financially as well. And if I can teach people how to do it as well without them stealing all my design sense, I would be very happy.
You're kind of building a self-sustaining system.
I think so, yeah. And as like in 2033, 22 million abandoned homes, I think it's just it's so sad to see some of these like old historical buildings just going to waste as well, and no one actually realized that it's value that's thrown away, really.
You renovate homes, you make videos, but you also wrote this book here.
Yes.
How and when came the book into play? Like writing a book is a whole other endeavor where you have to sit at the computer and you just type for...
Yeah, I was up until 5 a.m. for months. It started right after I posted those 2 videos on Anton in Japan. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of comments of people people didn't realize, I don't think anyone has done what I've been doing before and actually made content about it. So people had so many, I just wanted to share the truth, really. There are 10 million free houses in Japan, like anyone can get one, but foreigners can't own a house in Japan. And you have to pay taxes of millions of dollars in taxes just to get one of those free houses. Like there were so many myths that I felt kind of sickening.
You felt the responsibility to kind of
to clear out
the
all
misinformation about akiya in Japan.
So much misinformation. And I just read the comments on my channels for months, took notes. I had 20 pages of just notes and questions from people.
So this book is based on all the questions that people have asked.
It's based on all the questions on all my social media channels. I do TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. So just reading questions and then consulting with people. And then I had independent editors in Seattle who kind of like helped me with everything English related and everything. I wrote a book and then they kind of desiccated it and made it into this book project.
It looks very nice and has a very cool cover as well. We just went through the sakura season, which are very nicely visible.
Yes, and it matches the background of the wall here almost. Yeah, this is for you.
Thank you very much. I'll make sure to read it for when I renovate. I'm actually in the process. No, I'm not in the process. Today, my apartment renovation is supposed to finish, but I'm not the one doing the renovation.
Next time.
Yeah, next time maybe.
Here
in Osaka, in the north of Osaka, and so I'll see it on Monday for the first time. But thank you very much. I'm very excited to see that, and I think it's a lot of people's dream, right? To pick up one of those akiya, renovate it. But then the reality of actual renovation is something else. And
I would say there are a ton of opportunities with akiyas. But if you're not going to spend time here, and if you're actually not going to invest in Japan, I don't think it's for you, really. If you want to spend time in Japan, go for it. There are a ton of opportunities. But if you actually don't know anything about Japan, and if you're not interested in Japan itself, I don't think akiyas is for you.
We talked about a lot of topics today, from your move to Japan, how you got into renovating house, the process of doing so, a little bit what happened on YouTube, and what the content you're creating. Do you feel like there are some topics that we haven't covered today that you would like to share and get into a little bit more?
I really enjoyed talking with you, Tobi. What do you want to know? Well, maybe personal about your renovation.
My renovation.
Yeah.
My renovation has been maybe less stressful than yours, because I haven't done the DIY part of things. It's an apartment from 1986, I think.
So the new earthquake laws came in 1983.
Yeah, so it is under the norms of the new... well, this is something we haven't really discussed, right?
Yeah, earthquake laws.
Earthquake laws in Japan, and these older places are not to the latest norms.
No. 83, if you buy a property after 1983, you can usually get a loan financed by the bank. But if you buy something before, not really. You can just get like a fraction of the value of the house. But if you're a cash buyer, it doesn't really matter, because you don't need a loan, right?
Is there any way for you then during the renovation process to establish more safety for earthquakes?
Yes.
Or is the building basically fundamentally not...
No, every building that I take on, I make it way stronger. Even though I take away walls and sometimes pillars, there are ways to actually make the building stronger. You add the braces. I add like a concrete slab under the entire house with chemical screws going into the foundation. So it creates like a steady ground that the house sits on. Then you add these X braces that makes, if the house shakes, so you gotta have it in different directions. So if you imagine a house with four walls, if you only have the X's in a vertical, you gotta have them in that way as well.
Okay.
So I've removed windows in order to just add extra ones, and I have great people around me. I'm not doing the assessment of this on my own.
That's actually very interesting to know, because I was under the impression that maybe those old homes are just doomed to be destroyed whenever the next bigger earthquake hits, because the shaking will just make them fall into themselves. But actually, it's possible to stabilize them, to make them more resistant to...
It is. It's just about like how much money do you want to spend, and how safe do you want it to be. Even if you look at the Noto earthquake, there were like buildings from the 2000s
in January
who collapsed. And if you look at the pictures, I'm not an engineer, but I have a lot of experience in looking at these old houses. And generally, you don't want your house to be heavy on top. So if you look at old houses that have collapsed, like most of them, they have the kawara, the heavy tiles on top. So that's one thing that I've learned from carpenters and engineers that I've worked with. Like you wanna make the house lighter on top. Because if you think about it, if it shakes,
if the weight is on top, it just collapses.
So that, and also adding a lot of braces within the walls, and also like I like to have them visible as well, because I just find them cool and then kind of a feature as an interior.
You can
feature.
make it as part of the design.
Exactly, especially if you make them in beautiful wood. I use beimatsu there as well. You sand it really cool and add some cool oil as well. You can have them in like metal as well if you want to, but I love wood, so wood is in my house is
There's one aspect of renovation we actually haven't covered, and it's just coming to mind, and it might be something a lot of people have questions about. We talked about the cost of some of those akiyas can have when you purchase them, from very cheap to still decent sum of money.
Yeah.
But what about the renovation process? How much should people plan for that? Is there a ballpark, or is it really very specific to each property?
So, first of all, how much time can you allocate on your own? If you know nothing about DIY and you are not going to spend much time in this house, it's going to be expensive no matter what. A lot of real estate agents are trying to like introduce you to renovation companies as well, and be careful because they always get a kickback from the renovation companies, and then you can spend millions and millions of yen for literally nothing.
Just the introduction.
Yeah, more or less. So it depends on if you're just gonna like renovate the surfaces, you can do it on your own more or less. But if you're gonna tear out the kitchen, you can do it cheap, and you can buy a cheap kitchen from Yahoo Auction, a used one that could be like $1,500. You can get a new toilet from a home center for $300-400 with a washlet, you know, sometimes with the installation included. New aircon, $500. There are a lot of things you can do, and you can use a lot of recycled items as well. In Japan, new equals good. And if you're okay with work in a sustainable way and work with recycled material, there's a lot of cheap options who actually you won't compromise too much on quality as well.
You mentioned that you were not allowed to do some of the electrical work, some of the plumbing, and also the gas.
Yeah.
How much should people plan for having experts come in to handle those?
So I'm doing that in my new house now, and I'm working with about 600,000 yen for the entire electrical work to redo the entire house.
600,000 yen for the entire house.
That's about $4,000. And then on top of that, I will add like an induction heater for the kitchen. So that's just for the electrician's work, and for new wires and a new fuse box and these kind of things. And sometimes you got to up the electricity. Usually Osaka has a different system than Tokyo, the Kanto region. And 60 ampere meter, usually that costs about $1,500 to get like Tokyo Denryoku to come and put in new wires. So there are many people you got to be in contact with in order to actually renovate a house. But electricity, let's say $5,000. Plumbing, depends on what you put in. It's nice to have a new bathtub. I'm a little bit conflicted now with the new house. I want to save the tiles, but there's
remove the blue tub.
I removed the blue tub, but I want to keep the blue tiles, but they have a lot of cracks in them, so I'm a little bit concerned if I can save them or not. And if we're not going to save them, we're going to put bath panels on top, and that might cost a few $1,000s. But I think this new house will hopefully, knock on, this is not real wood?
It's some kind of wood.
Knock on fake wood. But I think about 5 million yen, and I think we'll have the entire house done. But with that said, I'm doing a lot of work too, and the house will look fantastic in the end.
Looking forward to see it.
When you're in Tokyo, you're welcome to come by.
Thank you very much. So people should budget.
People should budget. People should budget
It's not exactly free, right?
It's not free. There are free houses, but
there's work for renovation.
There's a lot of work to be done. It's a lot of time spent. And Japan is all about convenience. And if you paying with your time, and if you want to be in Japan, there are a lot of opportunities. But even if the house is free, it will cost you a lot of money to fix it up.
I think this is some good way to close the conversation for people to know they should be prepared. They should maybe not listen so closely to what they see in the main media, but do a lot of research. Be in Japan, ideally, meet the people, talk to the people, meet the community, and get a better understanding of what they're getting themselves into with renovating akiya. But if done well, it can turn into beautiful projects like yourselves.
Exactly. And community is key. You give to your community and opportunities will arise. That's like, if you buy an akiya, you take care of it well. It's a labor of love, and your neighbor is going to more or less give you their akiya if you're in the countryside.
Thank you, Anton.
Thank you very much, Tobi.
Thank you for your time and for sharing your story.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. This was Unpacking Japan, and we will be back next week. Bye.
Arigatou gozaimasu.
Are you looking for another podcast episode to listen to next? If you like the one you just listened to, I'm sure you'll also enjoy the one that I've selected and linked in the description down below. Go check it out.